Alright, so I wanted to talk about the newest Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that is currently streaming on Netflix. For me, I have been a fan of this franchise for a while, ever since the remake in 2003 came out. I think I was already probably 9 years old when that movie came out, and I remember watching, at the very least, the original and the first sequel, and obviously the remake one whenever it came out. I haven't seen all of the movies. I've seen the original 1974 film, the first sequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, the 2003 remake, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, the prequel to the remake, and then this newest one. I haven't seen Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw 3. I haven't seen the next generation, but I've seen clips just because Matthew McConaughey seems like he's crazy in that movie. And I haven't seen Texas Chainsaw 3D or Leatherface, although just from things I've heard about them, I'm not really sure I want to, because, do your thing, cause I got decently excited for this movie just because I learned they were doing a new one. This was after I got back into the series, after sort of rediscovering the original movie after having not watched it for a very long time. Then the first trailer that came out, I think back in December, looked a little iffy, and then I did like the second trailer. I thought it had a decent possibility of being okay, but there's still enough doubt for me to kind of have my expectations very low. I was kind of hoping for the best, but expecting it to be not great. So my overall thoughts with this movie. I thought it was alright. Even though I haven't seen all of the movies, I still don't think it's probably the worst one just based off of what I've heard. Now, out of the ones I have watched, it's probably the weakest. I haven't seen Texas Chainsaw 2 in a very long time, and even then I wasn't really the biggest fan. So for me, it might be better than that one. I thought it was okay. I actually think it's a pretty decent slasher movie. It's not the best Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie though. It is missing some things which I'll go into detail with later, but I thought the kills in the movie were pretty great. Leatherface I actually liked a lot. He was very intimidating. I thought pretty scary. Although there were some aspects, especially since this movie is supposed to be a direct sequel to the original, there are aspects of his character that I thought they did kind of leave behind. The story was pretty basic, pretty bare bones. Some of the characters were too. Honestly, most of the characters. And I found it to be a pretty standard slasher movie that on the whole is pretty inoffensive. There is a big thing which I will get into which really brought down my enjoyment of the movie, but it was entertaining. I had a decent time watching it. Like I said, it's pretty inoffensive. For me, it's kind of hard to call it one of the worst movies ever or something like that, because I think it still has a decent bit of good to it. So yeah, just my sort of non-spoiler overall opinion. It's okay. I think it's worth a watch. It's barely an hour and a half, so it's not like it's even that much of your time to watch. I'd say give it a shot, as long as you kind of know what you're getting into, of course. So this is going to be a spoiler warning. I feel like horror movies like this are kind of hard to really spoil, but nonetheless, spoiler warning. So the characters, the main sisters, I thought were okay. Most specifically, the one that survives in the end. I think her name was Mel. She was really annoying at first, but like I wouldn't say grew to like her, but I could deal with her as the movie went. And I was quite surprised when she gets sort of the surprise death at the end. Otherwise, characters were just there. You kind of had the bus full of people that literally exist just to die. You had the boyfriend guy who has a pretty neat death, just was getting his face like sliced open with a meat cleaver. He was kind of a dick. Like, I didn't mind him, but just the whole thing with kicking out the old woman and just not really seeming all that concerned with it. I didn't really like him. All the characters were pretty much just I think his name was Richter, like the guy with the truck. No, he was cool, but he gets killed, I'd say, fairly quickly. Going into Leatherface, again, I thought he was very intimidating, very scary. I like how it was the death of the old lady that caused him to break instead of him just still being a killer. I thought he was good. I thought he actually looked pretty scary. The face he wears looked a little weird at times, but I thought he was good. He's definitely still pretty fast and spry for an old guy. Even if you say he was younger, like in his mid-20s, in 1973, he'd still be in his 70s in this movie. So yeah, I liked him despite him seeming a little too murderous and sometimes kind of smart. Leatherface in the original movie, he was definitely mentally handicapped and more so just kind of being bullied into everything because of his family, and he was even a little bit scared of them. But here, he has no problem with killing. He's a little Jason-ish, which isn't really something you could do with Leatherface, and who knows, maybe he just kind of changed that way as time went went on. Kind of missing the family thing, which I really think adds to Leatherface as a character, but we'll kind of get more into that later. On the whole, I liked Leatherface, even if he doesn't totally match up with kind of my preferred thing with him, which is he's more so kind of a, I don't want to say a victim of his family, just because he does willingly kill people, but you know, he's being taken advantage of for sure. Now we're getting to Sally, and kind of my big thing with the movie. Just all around, she was very misused, wasted, borderline disrespected. Just because obviously it's not the same actress. Marilyn Burns died in, I believe, 2014. So it's almost kind of like, why even bring back the character if you're going to do the whole Halloween 2018 thing? Just because that movie would have been a little awkward if Laurie Strode was played by someone other than Jamie Lee Curtis. So there's that. She gets like 5 minutes tops of screen time. I would be surprised if she had more than that, because she had like 2 brief scenes before she becomes involved in the plot, and then is almost immediately killed after having the chance to have killed Leatherface. And I just don't really think she's the type that would be waiting around to get revenge. She just seemed happy to get out of there alive back in the original movie, and then just to have her show up basically just to die and get tossed immediately into literal trash, like, I just don't understand it. It's dumb, it was a waste, and it really threw me out of the movie, because I was kind of thinking the movie was seriously like a solid 8, you know, on a 1 to 10 scale. Just as a typical kind of bare bones slasher, I thought it was pretty good and entertaining. But then that happened. I recovered a bit, but I'll get more into it later, but that really affected my enjoyment. So yeah, she was just a waste. As I said before, story's pretty bare bones. I didn't really like how they kind of went about doing their whole commentary of certain things in the movie, whether it be school shootings and gun control, some racism stuff in there, and capitalism, blah, blah, blah. It just has that thing of, let's just mention it and that's kind of it. Like, I don't know, it didn't ever really do anything with it, and it just feels very out of place within the movie. So kills are great. I believe the standout one is the very first one where Leatherface snaps the dude's hands with a bone sticking out and stabs him in the neck with his own bones. That shit was wild. Oh my god. A lot of other ones were good. I really, as messed up as it is to say, I really enjoyed the bus scene, just because I kind of, again, as messed up as it sounds, I like when horror characters have that scene just to sort of let loose and do their thing just in a crowd. Do your thing, cuz. Oh my god. Because Jason sort of had that in Freddy vs. Jason. Freddy Krueger had it in A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, pretty sure, with the pool party. Pinhead had his in Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, with the nightclub. So it's kind of neat that Leatherface got one, and he was messing up people. This is definitely gorier than a lot of entries in the franchise that I've seen. I don't think it's gory on the level of something like a Saw, where I feel like that's all that movie exists to be, is just torture porn and just gore for the sake of gore. Granted, some of it did get to be a little much, but not necessarily to a point where I really was super bothered by it, other than your standard, oh my god, that's disgusting. But if you are kind of just into it for that sort of thing, I really don't think you will be disappointed with this movie. 2, I think, very positive aspects of this movie are the visuals and the score. I did like the score in the movie, even though some of it could maybe be a little plain at times. A lot of it did kind of stand out for me, and I just dug it. I don't know, I thought it was neat. And then with the visuals of the movie, I actually thought it was very well shot. A lot of things were pretty cool looking, even if something like, say, The Town was a bit plain. But just like the use of color, especially on the bus, I don't know, I thought it had a really cool look to it. Like that shot when Leatherface is walking out of the sunflower field with a storm in the background, that was a cool shot. There was just a lot of really cool looking visuals in the movie. And another thing I thought it did good for some scenes was tension, which that for me is a key thing in horror movies, which is also part of why I hate just typical jump scares, because it ruins tension. Even though it was just a couple scenes here and there, like I thought Mel being stuck in the apartment with Leatherface, having to be quiet, and like when she's climbing down to get down the steps without creaking the floors, like that was, I honestly thought that was pretty tense, especially just given how Leatherface was in this movie. And then her trying to get out of the crawl space was pretty tense. I mean, hell, despite being very entertained by Leatherface just cutting down people in a bus, them being stuck in the bathroom with the blood coming under the door, that, again, very tense. I'm not gonna say I was super on the edge of my seat or anything like that, but I really enjoyed that aspect to it as well. Now, some of the negatives, honestly, is sort of just its relation to the original movie, which I've kind of mentioned before with Sally. She was just a complete waste. And then a lot of the Texas Chainsaw movies really just seem like people just want Leatherface and gore. But a lot of it, especially when you look back at the original movie, and hell, I feel like even the remake understood this. I'm granted, the remake's really good, but still. The movies need to have this real, just dark, gritty, sweaty feel to it, because part of why that first movie is so effective is it looks like it's real, and it almost looks like a snuff film type thing of just looking like some homemade thing that you weren't meant to see. And it's kind of missing that, and it's missing Leatherface's family. They add a lot more to Leatherface himself, because he's not your typical just, I'm gonna go out and murder people guy. Especially talking about in the original movie, he shouldn't be that. And you're missing some of the more overly disturbing stuff that made the original movie so scary and really sit with people. You know, like where's the bone couch and all that kind of stuff, where something as freaky and just mentally unsettling as the dinner scene. Maybe I'm being a little easy on this movie, because I feel like I am talking about some kind of key things to be a Texas Chainsaw movie. I just really feel like they went too hard into the typical slasher direction, and that this series has always been just a little more than that. So final thoughts. This is a movie I enjoyed. As I said before the Sally stuff, like when she comes in and confronts Leatherface and then almost immediately dies, I feel like the movie was an 8. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was better than I expected it to be, and I could get over some of my complaints, like Leatherface being a bit more of a straightforward bad guy, and there not being some of the more disturbing elements and just being a more straightforward slasher. But then that happened, and it went from an 8 to honestly dropping down to like a 5. Like that really just kind of ruined that for me. But then it kind of picked up a little bit at the end. If I had to use the whole scale of 1 to 10 rating, it's either a 5.5 or a 6, which might sound a little hard on it, but for me, a movie only really starts to kind of be, I guess, bad when you hit like a 4 or below that. I think it's a decent watch. It's not necessarily the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie I would want, but I still think it's alright. I really do think a lot of people are being very hard on this movie when it really doesn't deserve a lot of the hate it's getting. It definitely, trust me, it has problems. It's just not the disaster that I see some people making it out to be. But I would say, again, with it being under an hour and a half, give it a watch. It's not horrible. If you're just in to have a good time with a slasher movie that might not do a whole lot new, it's worth your time. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What did you think about the movie? Which movie in the series has been your favorite? What's your least favorite? Which version of Leatherface is your favorite? Let me know and let's talk about it. As always, if you like this, maybe think about hitting the like button. That helps me out a lot. And of course, maybe even think about hitting a subscribe and check out my other stuff. I don't do a whole lot of horror stuff so far, just because there's not a whole lot of horror that I'm really into, but I do like to talk about the ones that I am into. So as always, thank you guys for watching and listening, and I'll see you all soon. Have a good one.